Hello and welcome to Christ Baptist Church for our worship services here during the coronavirus lockdown. And if you're joining us, I want to just say welcome to you, that you're here with us as we're going to be able to worship in song. And we'll be in the book of Ephesians this morning, going through the life of a spirit-filled Christian and what that means for us. So if you're here, just even for the first time, just tuning in to see what we're doing. We've been going through the book of Ephesians from chapter 1 on, and we're now in chapter 5. And it's going to be a great time of worship, lifting up our voices in song to the Lord, as well as hearing from Him through His Word. And just a special note for our church family, Christ Baptist Church family, it's with some sadness and with joy that I want to let you know that Teresa Hobie is now with the Lord. And the Lord had called her home, I believe it was on Friday morning, and so she is in no pain and in tremendous joy, now just waiting for when all of her loved ones are going to come join her. She'll be able to receive them in heaven, as Jesus tells us in Luke chapter 16. So it's a homegoing for her, where she now is matching up with how she's been made as a new creature in Christ. But it's sadness for us here who really miss her and her input into our lives. And so I just want you to know that that happened. And Daniel, her husband, has scheduled a family memorial on Monday. It's just for family and some close friends, because we're under coronavirus lockdown, and so there could only be a small number of people by number. So there's going to be people by invitation, mainly family, that are going to show up, and we'll be able to live stream as well to be able to help some family that can't travel from other parts of South Africa. So the Lord has given us that ability to be able to share with family about this a tragic but joyful event. And so that's coming for family news here in Christ Baptist Church. And so now we're going to be able to get into our worship service. And so worship with your heart and just singing with all that you have to the Lord, and then we'll be listening to Him in His Word.
to be the King of a vast domain, only held in sin, dressed I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. Than to be the King of a vast domain, only held in sin's dress I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. You are my strength when I am weak. You are my treasure that I seek. You are my all in all. Seeking you as a precious jewel, not to give up, I'd be a fool. You are my all in all. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Taking my sin, my cross, my shame, rising again, I'll bless your name. You are my all in all. When I fall down, you pick me up. When I am dry, you fill my cup. You are my all in all. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name.
Well, welcome again. We find ourselves now in the book of Ephesians here, in Ephesians chapter 6. We've made it through chapter 5 and talking about what it is to be a spirit-filled Christian. And one of the things I want to bring out this morning is there's a set of wrong thinking, there's a fallacy amongst practicing Christians here today, and that is that maybe that we might have two kinds of lives. We have the sacred and the secular. We have our church, our worship life, and then we go about our life in work and family and all the things that we normally do outside of church. Well, that could not be further from the truth. That is exceedingly wrong thinking. Our spiritual life is inseparable from our secular life. As new creatures, 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17, we've been made new. All things have come new creature, something brand new. Christ is united with us. and He is with us in every area of our life. There's not an area of your life that He isn't going to be. And so, as Christians, it's completely wrong thinking to think that, well, I've invited Him into my life and I give Him the keys to some rooms of my house, but not keys to other rooms because I'm not ready to give those up yet. Well, that's completely wrong thinking. That's something that the Bible never speaks of like that, and that you can be assured that you are truly a child of God when you have that kind of perspective or attitude. Surely we all find ways in our lives that we still are hanging on to sin and hanging on to idols, and the Lord reveals those to us, and we just keep laying them at His feet, and as we keep understanding who we are in Christ. But it's not up to us to determine that we're not going to let the Lord into certain aspects of our life, and we're going to have a sacred life and a secular life. Like we have a secret life that we go off and do secret things with. Much of Scripture in the Old Testament is God condemning Israel for that very attitude. No, we're a new creature in every area of our life, and there's probably no greater area that we see the need for our spiritual life to enter into, which is the family life. And I say this because if we were on a typical Sunday morning, not locked down, but we'd get ready to go to church, our secular life at home, getting the kids ready and getting ourselves ready and trying to be on time and all that, as well as coming home after the service. Is lunch ready? Is it burned? Or are we going to be able to eat? Are the kids doing what they need to do? Should we sit down to eat? And what do we talk about? Those seem like completely different worlds at times, doesn't it? Well, it's not meant to be. As Spirit-filled Christians, when I say Spirit-filled, they're going back to Ephesians 5 verse 18, not to be drunk with wine, for that is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. Being a Spirit-filled Christians means we're Spirit-filled when we wake up and we're getting ready to go to church. We're Spirit-filled as we worship. We're Spirit-filled when we come home. We have lunch, or we might go out with friends and people, and how we think about the day and how we think about what we're doing outside of church is our spiritual life as well as our secular life. It's both. The Bible addresses all these areas. The Bible addresses worship, work, government, finances, farming, war, economics, judgment, families, and marriage, and all kinds of aspects. The Bible is informing us how God's people live in these areas. They don't live separate like they've got something separate and different rules. Even we learned in the book of Daniel, young Daniel was taken away captive and had to be in Babylon, and he was employed in Babylon. He was moved up to the highest levels of government service. Well, he wasn't a non-Jew in that time. He wasn't a Babylonian then. He was having to work for Babylonians, but he was still God's child. He was still part of God's people, living God's ways with God's laws in that environment. So we see here that right here in Ephesians chapter 6, as we get into really the family life, parents and children. We dealt last couple weeks with husbands and wives. And it all comes down to Ephesians 5:18, being filled with the Spirit. What does it mean to be filled with the Spirit? Well, certainly, if we look at Ephesians 5:18 and 19, we see that there's speaking to one another in songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. There's great worship that takes place. But it's not a feeling, it's not an emotion. Emotion and feelings are products of it. Fervent worship is a product. But you know what else is a product? We see right here after verse 21, being subject to one another in the fear of Christ, wives being subject to their own husbands as to the Lord, is being filled with the Spirit. Husbands loving their wives as Christ loved the church is being filled with the Spirit. And now we see right here in Ephesians chapter 6, moving on, we see then a relationship between children and parents. And so with that, it makes sense dealing with submission as we go, what that means, that the family life is a critical area of where we desperately need to have Spirit-filled Christians informing us of how families are supposed to be under God's economy. And I would say there's probably no greater secular impact, no greater impact than we Christians, we at Christ Baptist Church, no greater impact that we can have on society in Polokwane, in South Africa, than that that impact that we have on our family. That's why it's listed right here as number 2. The biggest impact, if you're married, would be husband and wife relationship, proclaiming Christ and the church, his relationship to the church, and proclaiming the gospel to the people. But the next is when we are Spirit-filled Christians living in a family in this way. And it's talking about family life. And I think this is more important than how we are when we're doing our business, when we're in our offices, when we're downtown, when we're making all kinds of big decisions. That's not near as important, because it doesn't have near the impact on a global society as the local family. Let me just give you a few examples coming right out of Scripture. One of the first is 1 Samuel chapter 2. There was a judge, and he was a priest. His name was Eli. Eli the priest. And he had 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who were also priests. He had no control of them. They grew up on their own. They disregarded the priesthood, but they were still priests. So they used their authority to bully people, taking over all what they had, taking all the meat out of their pots. And then they would just be so promiscuous to go out and take advantage of all the women who were serving in the temple. Eli didn't do anything about it. God judged Eli, and he judged Israel because of that. He even said in 1 Samuel chapter 2, he sent a prophet to Eli that said, "Why do you honor your sons more than me?" And that seems like a strange statement, because Eli himself really regarded the priesthood as something very important. But you know what? Eli did not discipline his sons, meaning he did not teach his sons. He did not spend time with his sons, so they grew up independently doing whatever they wanted. And Eli did not correct them in any way. He didn't help shape their worldview. He did not inform them. Therefore, he was honoring them over God. Because you see, Eli, like many parents today, are afraid that if I speak harshly to my children, if I correct them, if I take this away from them, if I make them come to church, oh no, they might pull away. They might pull away from God. They might pull away from me. I can't let that happen. So let me do nothing. That's honoring your children over God. It's a very dangerous place to be. We also see Samuel himself. Samuel himself, who was a judge that came. He had 2 sons. The Bible says they were worthless. They did not follow in his footsteps, so he spent most of his time all in ministry, did very good things. However, his sons could not follow on, so therefore Israel had nobody to take Samuel's place. And because the people of Israel knew there was nobody to take Samuel's place, because his sons had no reputation, they said, now we want a king. We want a king, and they rejected God as their king, and they accepted Saul. All because we don't take care of our families. How about David? He had a whole host of children, and while he's out conquering and leading Israel, he's not managing his family. His first son Amnon attacked his half-sister, the sister of Absalom, raped her. David did nothing. Absalom, who was the third born, he protected his sister, so he killed Amnon. David did nothing. Absalom then hated his father so much that he just kicked him out of the kingdom and took over the kingdom for a while until he was killed. The 5th son, Adonijah, decided he would be king and just took it on his own to do that. It was chaos. The whole house of David was in chaos. David had many wives. He himself was not in order. And then when he had Solomon, he tried to teach Solomon. Solomon took David's whole sin to another level. David had many wives. Solomon had 1,000 women, the Bible tells us. And then Solomon tries to teach his son Rehoboam. Rehoboam didn't want to hear it. He had no relationship with Solomon. And he goes off then, and the kingdom is split. A whole nation is split because families are not managed. Families are not dealt with in God's way. And that's true all throughout society. Why is crime up? Why is there so much out there in these cities, especially urban cities? Because there are no families. The families are not raising their children the right way. The children grow up believing they have a right to fight their parents. Parents have no position. And so because the family's not doing its job, the government wants to take over and raise the children. That's why we see this is such an important factor. But there's an even more important factor. After Moses led the people to the land, Joshua came into the land, and they took over everything, and everything was set, and then Joshua died. Judges chapter 2, verse 10 tells us, after that generation died out, another generation came out who did not know the Lord. They didn't fear the Lord at all. They didn't know him. Don't know anything about him. This is Israel. After they came across through the Red Sea. One generation. Who's God again? Don't know anything about him. Why? Because nobody was managing at all, thinking, how do I raise my children to know the Lord? How do I raise children the way God wants family to be? Well, we say that was, Pastor, that's fine, but that was Israel back then, and they were very rebellious. Well, if we look at it today, a couple of statistics. Those born after 1980 are 33% less likely to be going to an evangelical church like their grandparents did. But here's a bigger statistic that's important. From the early 2000s, 64% of young adults in the 18 to 29 year age bracket dropped out of church. They don't want to come back. Now, many of them have a lot of reasons. They get married, and a lot of things, various kind of things happen, but there's no commitment. There's no loyalty. 64% nowadays, 64% are saying, I don't want to go back to church. At least I don't want to go back to your church. That sounds pretty depressing. That sounds like, how are we going to survive? Well, what's the answer to that? Well, I'll tell you what the answer is. We didn't see it with Eli the priest. We didn't see it with Samuel. We didn't see it with David. What a big mess. We did see it with one. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, 51. Luke chapter 2, 51. We see Jesus. He was with his family, and they went into Jerusalem for the feast. They all got back in the caravan. They all went back up. Then they noticed Jesus wasn't with them. They came back to Jerusalem and saw him in the temple, and he was there with the teachers of the law in the temple, and they were going back and forth, and he was asking them questions. They were asking him questions. And they said, what are you doing here? And he said, didn't you know I had to be about my Father's business? I mean, he already knew what his mission was. He said, didn't you know this is where I'm supposed to be? They said, yeah, but you're 12 years old. You need to come with us. We're your family. And he did, and he went back with them. And Luke chapter 2, 51, Luke records, and he continued on with them, being subject to them, submitting to them. And he's in favor with God and man. He managed the sacred with the secular. He merged the two. I will submit to my parents, and I have to be about my Father's business. Jesus showed us, no, this is how we do it, right here. He could do it because he's the God-man, and he was Spirit-filled, and he followed God in every way. And because he could do that, of course now, since he died and resurrected, he died so that we could have his life. We could have his Spirit. We have his righteousness. So now we can do this because we have his mind, as we learned last week. We have the mind of Christ. And he demonstrates to us in earthly ways, this is what it looks like. It's not just all heavenly ways, like he's righteous and he's spiritual and all that. No, he came to earth to be physical and physically do it. And we could see that. And then he gave his life to us. He says, now you can do this. And this is how families are built, families are strengthened, and society is impacted. We see here in Ephesians chapter 6, just 4 verses right here. So if your Bibles are open, let's take a look at Ephesians chapter 6. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So this is a reading of God's Word here, these first 4 verses of Ephesians chapter 6, telling us how to merge the sacred with the secular, how to have Spirit-filled family relationships. Well, as we take a look at this, these 4 verses, it breaks down pretty simply into commands for the children and commands for the parents, and primarily the father. And there are 2 commands for the children and 2 for the father. And so let's take a look at the commands for the children right here. It's pretty straightforward, and I think this is going to be a very practical teaching for us today. So children, it says right away, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. So the first command is to obey. Obey your parents. Notice here in the text, it doesn't say obey your father and leaving the mother out. Obey both your parents together. Now I know sometimes some families might not have a mother. Some families might not have a father. That's okay. The point is, whoever is over you, you obey them. And you obey them willingly. You obey your parents. And this is put here, why the children are listed first is the same reason the wife was listed first in verse 22, saying, be subject to one another in the fear of Christ. And so the ones who are going to be subject, the ones who are going to obey here are children. Doesn't tell us how old they are, doesn't matter. When you have your parents, you obey your parents, and you submit to both of them. And in particular, speaking to Spirit-filled children here, which children can be Spirit-filled. They can be saved and they can be born again. And they now have the life of Christ in them. And how are you supposed to obey? You obey in the Lord. Now this doesn't mean that your parents must be Christians. Obey your parents who are in the Lord. It doesn't say that. That's not what it's talking about here. It's saying obey in the Lord your parents. Meaning obey your parents as you would obey the Lord, as you're obeying the Lord. Not like they have the command of the Lord, but because you obey the Lord, just like we learned in Husbands and Wives, as you obey the Lord, you obey your parents. Because why? Jesus is saying to you as a child, hey, you're under your parents, obey them. It doesn't matter if they're saved. It doesn't matter if they're Christian. It doesn't matter if they're something else. This is the structure of society. This is the structure of how we picture God and us together, that you obey. And you obey in the Lord. Because you're really submitting to Christ so you can obey to whom He tells you to obey, which is you're placed under your parents' authority. And so you're obeying as to the Lord. And I want you to see right here, there's a simple reason why. It's not a complicated reason. It's a simple reason. Obey your parents in the Lord. Why? For this is right. It's right. It's not wrong. See, it's wrong to disobey. It's right to obey. That's pretty straightforward. Let's not make it more complicated than it is. And what this is saying here is it's right because it's natural. It's what we call natural law. It's the way the world was created from the beginning, all the way back. Children always are to obey their parents. That is the order that God set up. We even see it in many places in the animal kingdom even. It's an order of life as life comes up and intelligence comes up, and we see it in various kinds of animals. The young ones are taught by their parents and they obey. And when they don't, animals are pretty ruthless. They don't have patience. Animals don't have patience. They immediately turn around and bite that young one. You need to obey, get in line. You wait your turn. We see it all throughout. It's natural law. This is the way nature is meant to be. He's saying it's not even a spiritual thing here. It's order of nature. That's why you do it. To not do it is to go completely against nature and to go completely into what would be a depraved mind. Completely. If you want to see, I'll just read to you in Romans chapter 1, God speaks of giving people over because they've got they essentially suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Romans 1 verse 18 says, wrath of God is revealed against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. This is what they do. And so God gave them over, verse 24, the lust of their hearts to impurity. And God gave them over to degrading passions in verse 26. But I want you to see something else here. In Romans chapter 1 verse 28, it says, and just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. See, a depraved mind does things which are not proper. Well, what are those things? Well, it's being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, envy, full of evil, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They're gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil. And you know what the next one is? Disobedient to parents. Listed with all these things that are destructive to society, against the natural order, to do those things which are not proper. So, disobedient to parents is one of those things that he is doing to make that happen. And he says here as well in 2 Timothy chapter 3, Paul writes again to Timothy, he says, but realize this, that the last days difficult times will come, for men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents. Wow. Disobedient to parents. Both of those show how everything's tending toward chaos, God giving over depraved minds, insanity, and what's involved in that insanity when your children don't obey your parents. Just that forward. Growing up, my wife had a wonderful formula for our kids. As they were starting to grow up, we just had a simple rule. We say, how do you obey? Whenever there was a hesitation, they didn't want to do what we had to say. Is how do you obey? There are two ways, but immediately and without complaint. Otherwise, we don't have obedience. I need both of those, immediately and without complaint. And we would make them say that. How do I obey? Immediately and without complaint. I'll get to it. There we go. It's the natural order. So, the first teaching right here, Paul's saying, to be spirit-filled as a child, just follow in how you're made. Follow the natural order of things. You see, Christianity doesn't go against the natural. Christianity doesn't say, now that you're a new creature, do something different than how God made the world. No, he says, now you're going to do exactly how God made the world. That's what Christians can do. Christians can fulfill our purpose. So we obey because it's natural. Secondly, though, we see here in Ephesians, back to our text, get back to it here, Ephesians 6, second command for the children is to honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. To honor. What's interesting about this is you're getting Paul's command here, which is obey your parents. That's Paul. And Paul is giving a scripture. He's spirit-filled. He's writing scripture for us, so it's authoritative. And he's saying obey. But now he quotes honor, but he's quoting from Moses. He's quoting from the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 4. Honor your father and mother. And what's interesting about this, it starts with the word honor, not obey. Paul tells us to obey because it's natural. He wrote about disobedient to parents is a very unnatural thing. Now he's saying honor. Well, when you go to actually what Moses wrote in Hebrew, the word honor in Hebrew is the word kavod. What it means is very different than maybe what the picture is in Paul's language of Greek. What it means is that something is very heavy, weighty, like, whoa, we need to think about this. This is a big deal. This is heavy. Honor equates with heaviness. It's the actual word that you use for heavy. We happen to know that Eli was a big kind of fat man, and that's what the text says. He was old and heavy, or you could say old and honored in the way, because that's what that word means. It means be considered to be heavy, weighty, be considered to be very important. Gravity. Gravitas. That's what the word means. That's what he's quoting here. And he's saying, give weight, give pause, give meditation and thought. Your father and mother. Which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. So we already see the picture right there when he says honor. He's talking about children. Hang on now, it's not about obeying. We're moving now toward respect. We're moving now toward something that you need to consider. And he's saying here, this is a command with a promise, not just, it's any command with a promise, it's the first command with a promise. Now, when we look at this, we know that this commandment right here is the sixth commandment. It's not, it's not the first commandment. And actually, I think it's the fifth commandment there. And you got the rest, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, follow after, which are all related to how we treat one another. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. So we've got those as commands, and he's saying this is the first commandment with a promise. Well, none of the other commandments have a promise attached to them. And if none of them have a promise attached to them, this can't be the first of many with a promise attached to it. So what does it mean? Well, the best interpretation here for what it means is it's the first of the remaining commandments with a promise. All of them have the promise. All these commandments that follow, honor your father and mother, have this promise. This is the first one of all the commands that receives it, which means this is the biggest, most important of these commands. Let me just read the commandments to you as Moses writes this. And we see in the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. Second commandment, you shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness in heaven. The third commandment, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Fifth commandment, here it is, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. There's the promise right there. Honor your father and mother. And then the next 5, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, and shall not covet your neighbor's house. 5 of them dealing with how you relate to the people in your community. Don't murder, adultery, steal, lie against them, or covet. But before all those is honor your father and mother. See, when you're dealing with people, that's going to determine whether you live long in the land and whether your days may be prolonged in the land. If you're killing each other, stealing each other, taking each other's wives and houses, you're not going to survive real well. So an ordered society is don't do these things to each other. And these commands, by the way, that God gave aren't new. It's not like they went, wow, this is going to be difficult. No, they were all saying, yep, that's right. Yep, that's right. These are pretty basic. Don't kill one another. Don't steal one another's stuff. Yeah, those were already ingrained in everyone's hearts. They knew that. What begins it all? Honoring your father and your mother. You see, when you honor your father and mother, it's the first because it's the most important. It's what creates society. It makes it all ordered society. When that happens, the other things fall right in line. When you don't honor your father and mother, guess what starts to happen? Shootings, killings, robberies, lies, adultery. Because you don't honor your father and your mother. It starts right there as children. So this is the first commandment with a promise, and this is the promise that he's saying, that you'd live well in the land. And so it's really out of the commandments. This is number 5, and then you have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All follow. If number 5 is done, then you got a good chance of keeping 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But it's really difficult if you have an attitude of not honoring your father and mother. You're not going to honor authority. You're not going to honor any authority anywhere. And you're prone now to be very weak in these other areas. So honoring, meaning not just obeying. This is honor. This is respecting. This is saying, hey, you know, this is what you say when you go into my parents' house. That attitude, that perspective, that teaching forms the rest of your life. And it's exceedingly important. It's give weight to, give gravity to your father and your mother. Notice it's not just your father. In the days of the Roman Empire, in the days of the Greeks and that, it would be just your father. Your mother's, she's off doing something. She's off taking care of something in the garden. She's with the women. Honor your father. That's not what it says here. You honor both father and mother. Why? Because the two have become one flesh. They're your parents. In God's economy, you honor both. I remember once we were in seminary and we were going, I had the 4 kids there, and I was there with my wife and talking, and there was something that was said, I can't remember what it was, and they immediately challenged her. Immediately challenged her. And if I can't remember, and maybe she was incorrect in something one way or the other, it didn't really matter. But they were getting kind of up there, you know, in those adolescent years, trying to find their footing. Maybe I'm starting to grow to be a man or a woman and that. And there was an immediate challenge. Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. And I just remember, because this is so impressed on me, I just turned and says, you don't talk that way to my wife, buddy. Everything changed in our house at that moment. Everything changed in our house when I said those words, because I looked and I said, this is my wife. You're not going to talk to her that way. Like, who are you? Well, things changed very quickly. And you know what? We didn't need a lot of discipline. We didn't need a lot right there, because a line was drawn. That's what this is right here. And to think that, you know, I'm saying maybe making too much of this honor thing. Let's see what Jesus said in Mark chapter 7. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7. I'm going to read this to you, and you can get a flavor for where Jesus is on this matter. Verse 1, the Pharisees had some of the scribes gathered around Jesus when they had come from Jerusalem. And they'd seen some of his disciples were eating their bread with impure hands, that is, unwashed. They weren't following some traditions. It's not that they had unclean hands, it's that they were impure. They weren't going through a ritual of a ceremony. You got to go through certain things and a secret handshake and that kind of thing. Because verse 3 says, for the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they carefully wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. Get that? the tradition of the elders. There's traditions, spiritual traditions you're supposed to do. They said, Jesus, your disciples aren't doing this. And so, verse 4, and when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they cleanse themselves, and there are many other things which they received in order to observe, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and copper pots. So they have all these rituals they do that you're supposed to do, and they were condemning Jesus and his disciples because they weren't following these cultural traditions. Well, the Pharisees and the scribes then asked him, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat their bread with impure hands? Jesus turned right to them and he said, rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me, and in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men. Neglecting the commandment of God, you hold on to the tradition of men. You see, you don't want to follow the commandment of God. You'd rather follow your traditions. What's culturally appropriate. He was also saying to them, you're experts at setting aside the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. You're even going to change God's law, set it aside, maybe ignore it, so that you can keep your own traditions, your own culture. So here's Jesus' words now, verse 10. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and, get this, he said, Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and you know what else Moses said? He who speaks evil of father or mother is to be put to death. It's in God's law. Right there, it's that important. When you are rebellious to your parents, it's a death penalty for the child. That's exactly what God's law says. It's that important. And Jesus quotes it right here. There's no wiggle room here. Now, I don't think he's talking about grade R, grade double R, and first and second, third grade. I think he's talking about as they grow up and they begin to challenge. It says when they speak evil. They didn't say when they challenge or when they sin or when they argue. It says when they speak evil of their father and mother. That's a death penalty. Because that is the first step toward complete chaos in society. And God says we're going to eliminate it completely. Now, if you know the law, you obey the law, everybody's safe. People think that's harsh. No, it's not. God's trying to protect society. Jesus quotes it to the Pharisees. And here's what Jesus says. He says, but you say, if a man says to his father or his mother, whatever I have that would help you is Corban, that is, say, given to God, you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or his mother, thus invalidating the word of God by your tradition, which you've handed down, and you do many things such as that. You see, they had this tradition called Corban. It's a Greek word that means you can reserve your belongings so that when you're an adult child, you can take your home, you can take your land, you can take your animals, and you can declare it Corban, which means this is going to be given to God sometime in the future, therefore I can't help my parents with it. I can't give my parents this stuff. It's a way to protect your possessions from the obligation of taking care of your parents. That's pretty bad. And he said you do that so that you don't have to honor your father and your mother. You'd rather have your culture than God's word. And God's word says honor your father and mother, and when a child is being let loose to just speak evil of their father and mother, they're to be put to death. Jesus mentions that here. He doesn't just mention honor your father and mother. He says and he who speaks evil of his father and mother is to be put to death. Even when you're 30. You don't do that. Because it completely destroys society. There was a case of court in the United States some number of years back. And it was a family was homeschooling. A family was, they were really trying to keep away from the influence of society and public schooling. And what was happening was their conviction. I'm not telling you it's right or wrong. It was their conviction. And somebody came to their house. A government worker came to the house. And after observing them, made a charge, and they had to go to court, and they were trying to say we need to take these children away from their parents because something's wrong. Something's absolutely wrong. the social worker was saying. And you know what the issue was? The issue was the kids were all polite to each other, polite to her, and they were all getting along and they were helping each other. And the parents and the social worker said, that's not normal. That's not normal. We need to get kids back to normal. And the case was in such a problem for the family, they had to get a letter from the governor to say, no, this is a respectable family and I've got a testimony and you're gonna have to back down. You see, society doesn't like it when you follow God's law, and because God's law calls society out on many things. And so when children are reciting God's law and they're following God's law, now society's after your kids. That's what's happening now, for sure. For sure. And so society's trying to say, this is what's normal, you're not normal. You're extreme. You're a cult. That's what they're trying to say. But here we say, Jesus is saying, honor your father and your mother, and he who speaks evil of his father and mother will be put to death. So it's something that is saying that God's law is more important than culture. Can you live that way? Children, it's what God says. This is natural law. This is something that's meant to be ordered, and you will be far more advanced because of it. Far more advanced than if you follow the traditions and the cultures that are outside of the family of God's economy. This is how Christian families are to operate. So this is the children. Obey and honor. Two things. Obey, because the whole order of life on earth is structured that way. You honor. Why? Well, here's the reason why. The father is supposed to be the priest in the home. The father is the one who shows people who God is. By his relationship to God, he shows them who God is. And so in a child's mind, his picture of God is what? It's his father. The family is saying, this is how God's family works. We are children of God, and so this is how it works. We follow God in his word, we follow God in how we are, and we're separate from the world, and we live as light to the world, and that's what we do. So from the child's standpoint, he needs, and he or she, the child, the son or the daughter, need to have that picture of what God would look like if he was God in the flesh in their little minds. And it's why it's that important. And it's so important that children learn to honor their authority, because that's how they learn to honor the Lord. That's how they learn that. And so the children have the responsibility to do two things, honor and obey. That takes us down to the parents. The parents. The parents have an instruction right here, and specifically the father. So speaking to fathers here. We see in verse 4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So we see two instructions here for the fathers. Two instructions. And again, I realize not everybody has a father. A father might not be available. If that's the case, we have to then adapt, and we say, well, then mothers, this is what you do. When there's no father, here it is. I understand. I understand there's broken families. And also, just as a side note, I'll keep saying this, not every married couple has children. And not everybody's married, so they might not have children. But that doesn't matter. This is God's plan for the family to show how we are in the family of God, and God is our Father. So this certainly applies to us and our Heavenly Father. And it also applies to us who are older, who might be Sunday school teachers. You might be a teacher at a school. You know what? This is what we ingrain into our kids. We need to be teaching them. This is what God says, and you'll be blessed because of it. We know that, for example, if you honor your parents, as we said before, if you honor your parents, you'll live long in the land. Because why? Because society and you won't be getting into trouble with those other commandments. And the years that God gives you on the earth will be blessed because you started right. And you will have long days. It doesn't mean you're going to have long life and live to be 90 and 100. That's not necessarily so fun. What it means is the days you live will be full. long in the land, because you won't be doing those other things to each other. Well, given that, we're now on the parent side. The first command is a negative command. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Don't provoke your children to anger. Now, one of the things I'll speak to dads, one way you do this is you're a lot bigger than your kids when they're early on. And I know we all like to have little brothers, and so we think it's fun to wrestle with our kids. But understand, you're like 4 times taller than your kid, and you're terrifying. And you're terrifying them. Sometimes when we play a little too rough, and we provoke them to anger because we hold them a little too long, and we get them to squeal a little bit here and there, and their little heart starts to beat real fast. And while the mother's getting all excited, we're like, no, we're just having fun. Well, maybe they're not having that much fun, and you're provoking them. So we need to be very cautious, dads, here, that we don't provoke our children to anger. But I don't think he's talking about wrestling with your kids here. He's saying you have a responsibility of a soul. When you have a child in a family, you have a responsibility to look after and manage that soul and to lead that soul to God. That's your responsibility. Your responsibility is not to say, oh, look, he's going to be an engineer, he's going to be a scientist, she's going to be a doctor. No, that's not your job. That's going to happen as things just naturally come out. Your job is to educate, inform, and discipline this soul. At what it's going to take to not exasperate our children. You just take a look at some of these practical points that are going to help us. First, is we see that along with understanding that discipline is learning, parents have to be under control. You can't expect your child to be told to be under control when you're not. And so we never discipline when we're angry, never discipline when we're fearful. It's impossible to actually sound rational to your child when you're out of control yourself. So when your emotions are raging, that's not a time to teach and to give discipline. You'll exasperate them because they know what's coming out is emotion, not logic. They know you can't be trusted. The next one is, parents have to be consistent. Consistent. A consistent standard. It can't be, it's okay tonight, but it's not okay tomorrow night. It can't be that I'm okay now, but I've put up with something, I've let you get away with something over and over and over, and then when it finally comes, now I really hit it. That will exasperate your children when you have different boundaries, when you have different standards that set. Our children are watching, and our children remember. You know, we worry we live in a society where there's cameras everywhere and you can't get away with anything. There's something worse than cameras. You know what it is? It's children. They hear everything. Children hear everything, and they're interpreting it in their little minds about what they're saying, and they're wondering in their minds, well, why are you doing this? Why are you saying that? That doesn't make sense. They're understanding consistency. And they're always checking because they know what's right. I remember with my oldest, when he was about 10 years old, we were going on a major street, and we're going to cross the street. We waited for the light to turn green, and then they have that light symbol for the people to walk, and you could walk, and the little guy was on the little man was there on the green and going, and we started walking, but it was a very big street, and by the time we got halfway there, it immediately put a red hand and said, stop. You got to go back. And then the clock started going. And my son didn't know what to do. And I said, come on, we got to keep going. And he just shook his head. He goes, no. And he turned around and he went all the way back from where we started. Dad, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, no, it's okay to go when it's red? Right? Is that okay? My son said, no, that's not. You taught me. I don't go when it's red. We have to be consistent. Parents also have to listen. We have to listen. We don't always have all the facts as parents, do we? Sometimes there's something else that took place, and the child wants to tell you. You can't say, I don't want to hear it, now we're going to pay. That's going to exasperate them. That's going to provoke them to anger. We demand our rights as adults, the writ of habeas corpus. You can't just hold me in jail and not tell me what the charge is. You can't do that. You have a right as a child to say, I want to hear this, because our children don't have rights like we do, like we're equals, but our children need to be heard and understood. There's a relationship that takes place. In addition, parents must not be selfish. The child is not yours to do with what you want. Your child is not that you will make them an engineer, you will make them an athlete, you will make them get a bursary, you'll make them a doctor to satisfy your wishes. No. You can't be selfish. And you know what? When the children are little and you're at the church and you've been talking and they've been playing, you say, okay, now it's time to go. Right in the middle, when they're in the middle of playing, it's such a great thing. You say, I don't want to hear it. Come on, go. We're getting in the car. That's selfish. We as parents do that all the time. We're ready to go. I don't care. You're done. How about parents maybe once? You're done. They're not yet. You wait for them. They're playing. When they see that you wait for them and that you've actually given them that ability, oh, well, that strengthens the relationship. That really helps a lot. Parents also need to be reasonable. Reasonable with your discipline. There's a reason God gave an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, because it's reasonable. You never go beyond what was taken. You have to be reasonable. You don't just give your own expression of your own emotion. Parents must also never humiliate. You never humiliate. You never say anything. Now you might have to provide correction, discipline in public. Sure. That can happen because they did something wrong in public. But you don't humiliate them. You don't carry it out. You don't make a big scene like you are the righteous one that takes it. No, you take them, you speak to them, and maybe take them aside. Parents also need to learn to let their children grow. They get into adolescent years. They get beyond adolescent years. They grow. You don't treat them like you did when they were 8 and 9. You grow with them, and you give them responsibility as they have grown, and you teach them. You see, otherwise you're going to provoke them to anger. Parents must lead their children to respect their parents, because their parents really is the view of God to them. So those are some items there that talk about practically some things you want to think about as you're disciplining your children, as you're helping them, you're forming them, you're shaping their thinking as it goes. Now the second command here, this last one, is to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. This is important because you're not just to discipline a child, you're to teach them. You're to teach the child. And you're not just to teach them morality. You don't want to just teach morality. You're not just responsible for moral behavior. You're responsible for instruction. You have to teach them who God is. And to do that, you can't just give the children up to the public schools. You can't just say, here, you go. And that's why the idea of boarding school is a difficult one. I know, I understand, and it's a common thing. But it means children learn that home is something you have when you're on a holiday. I don't think that's God's plan, is that home is something for a weekend or a holiday. But that's where society has taken us, and that's where our education is now developed to. But what's missing then is the instruction that a father will be able to give to their children. So I'm not saying it's absolutely wrong. I'm saying these are things that are against what God is saying here and how He's shown us in this. We need to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And I'll just say this is difficult. It's hard teaching here. But it's, do we teach our kids actually the opposite? Is this something you battle with? That you actually teach your children that it's okay, that it's not that important to attend church regularly or to actually serve in church and participate in all the ministries there actively. That's for the extra zealous people to actually participate. We just attend, and we attend when we're in town. Because you're teaching them a lesson. You're teaching that the secular and the sacred are two separate things. I've got my spiritual life, which I'm okay with, and then I've got the rest of my life, which I'm going to succeed at. Is that what we're teaching our children? Because that is not what God is saying right here. That is not what leads to a long life in the land. Understand that you have a relationship with them. And one thing, and I know there's more I wanted to say, but I'll just read this to you in Deuteronomy chapter 6. God tells us right here in Deuteronomy 6 verse 7, he talks about the law of God. He says, you shall teach these laws, teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You know what that means? Parents, fathers in particular, you want to instruct your children, you want to have a relationship with them, you want them to grow, and you want them to be successful in life and God's economy. Here's what you do. You have conversations at the dinner table. You don't talk about your day at work. You don't talk about your wife's day and that. You start by saying, let's include the children. Tell us. Let's help you engage with what happened. Conflicts, joys that came up. They're part of the conversation. That's exactly what Deuteronomy chapter 6 says. You shall talk of them. But you go down to Deuteronomy 6 verse 20. When your son asks you in time to come, saying, what do the testimonies and the statutes and the judgments mean, which the Lord our God commanded you? It's a time for question and answer. Why are those people different than us, Dad? Why don't we do what they do? Why do we have something different than the world? Why is this happening? What a great time to raise up and to nurture your children. Conversation, questions. One thing I know that we've done is reading to your children. Studies have shown when you read to your children, it actually enhances almost every aspect of their learning ability, their aptitude, and their athletic ability when you read to them. And that causes them to want to read more on their own. That they read and they read more, and then once you get to where your reading skills are up, you know what? Reading the Bible is not that difficult. We can do that. And it's showing that you can do a devotion as a father, which means you open the Bible, a small passage of scripture, you read it, you ask any of them to participate, questions of what they heard, something they might want to add into it. You can pray as a family, and you're done. And what you've done is show them how to be a priest to your family, representing God. That is what that is. To bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. You're teaching them the joy of learning and relating. You're teaching them that God is not dull. God is not boring. God is not harsh. This is the greatest joy we have in our life, and the only way they can see that is if you have it. So really, this passage is not about children obeying the parents. It's about parents model for your children and pull them along. That's what this is saying. This is really for the parents, not so much for the children. They're smaller. We can pull them, and we can make that happen. And this is how you do it. So you create a relationship that works. I just want to close with this. There was a study done quite a number of years ago on two men 150 years after their death. One man was named Jonathan Edwards. He was a theologian. His grandfather was a pastor. He took his grandfather's church, Solomon Stoddard. And when they traced his line 150 years after his death, here's what came out of his family line. There's one United States vice president, one dean of a law school, one dean of a medical school, 3 United States senators, 3 governors, 3 mayors, 13 college presidents, 30 judges, 60 doctors, 65 professors, 75 military officers, 80 public office holders, 100 lawyers, 100 clergymen, that's pastors, and 285 college graduates. From Jonathan Edwards, who grew up with the scriptures in the discipline and the admonition of the Lord. They took another man who was in prison. The man's name was Max Jukes. He was out of the state prison system. What they tracked from him was 7 murderers, 60 thieves, 190 prostitutes, 150 other convicts, 310 paupers, 440 alcoholics, and 300 others who died prematurely out of all their people that they had. Two paths, just from 2 men, how they were raised in the family and the impact they had on society. We could say this is the most impactful teaching that we could have on how to take our spiritual and move it into the secular and invest in our children and not buy them video games so they can just be busy and we can do what we want to do. Not to invest in toys for them so they can not be part of us, but actually more invest our time so we can spend time talking with them, getting them to ask questions, asking them questions, and relating and forming in who God might make them into. That's an exciting opportunity, an exciting way to spend your time as we merge to be Spirit-filled Christians and Spirit-filled families. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word, of what you tell us about the importance of family and how good it is. And you give us these simple instructions to follow, Lord, that we can do this by the power of your Spirit. In Christ's name, amen.